The torque converter will either make or break your combination. And that's where we're at with Slaghammer now. We took it out to the track Saturday night. It was a fact-finding mission. Not so much, we weren't looking for ETs. We knew we weren't going to get ETs. But we needed to find out if the combination we had was viable. And it's not. And the reason it's not viable is because the torque converter is wrong. So I want to get into the different types of torque converters and what you need to know if you're going to go ahead and order one for yourself. And I'll show you what we screwed up too. So, to recap the car itself, for those who aren't familiar with the whole series that we did with this, the car is very old school. It's built in the style with all of the same parts as it would have been, let's say, in 1971, 72, 73, like that. The engine is a stock stroke 383. It's got the tunnel ram, it's got all the carburetors. It's a heavy car. It weighs about 3,400 pounds with me in it on the starting line. It's got a 430 gear, which really isn't enough for an eighth mile car, but I want to be able to run this car quarter mile and eighth, so the 430 is going to stay in it for the time being. The main difference between what this car would have been in the day and what it is today is that back then, a car like this would have automatically had a 4-speed. Because an engine like this will not make power until 3,500, 4,000 RPM. So the car needs that. With a clutch, you'll launch it at any RPM you need to. But with an automatic, you're at the mercy of the torque converter. Car can't launch any harder than the converter will let it. So when we ordered the converter for this car, we ordered two converters at the same time, both spec'd for the 4,000, 4,500 RPM range. One of them was a nitrous converter for bottle rocket, which has the same 727. It's got a small block 727. That one's got a big block 727. But we spec'd the converter for this car for nitrous because we have no intention of running it normally aspirated. It's going to be a nitrous-only car. So a nitrous torque converter is different than a regular torque converter. And nitrous is like a broad term. They call it a nitrous converter, but it would really apply to anything, let's say, with a power adder, not turbos, but let's say a supercharger, or even like a big stroker, like a 650-inch stroker that would make gobs of torque on the bottom end, would have a nitrous-style converter, something that's tight that won't let the engine. See, what happens is if you got an engine that makes huge power right on the hit, and you've got a loose converter, the engine will just blow through the converter. So you get all kinds of slippage and the car won't hit, the car won't leave. So that's why this car has a nitrous converter, a tighter 4,500 RPM converter. And at the same time we ordered a standard or a regular 4,500 RPM converter, same person, for this car. So now it was either a miscommunication or an honest mistake, whatever it was, but we ended up with two nitrous torque converters. And externally, you can't tell the difference. They look exactly the same. The magic is all on the inside. So what we have with this car here now is essentially the same as if it had a dead stock converter. Small engine like this doesn't make enough power on the hit to work a tight nitrous style converter. So that's why you saw when we ran the car, it sounds great, it makes great power, but the tight converter didn't allow the engine to get up into its power range to get the car moving with any sort of gusto. And that's the thing. The first, the 60 foot, your 60 foot makes up it's the most important part of the whole ET. And the first foot of that first 60 is the most important one. So if the car doesn't hit and work in that first 1, 2, 3 feet, the car is already under motion. And as the car is already rolling, it gives less leverage for the engine, for the torque converter to work, or for the engine to work against the converter. So in other words, the engine will have maximum effect against the converter when the car is at standstill. As soon as it starts to move even a little bit, instead of the engine working the converter to get the RPM higher, it just moves the car ahead, and so it'll ooze off the starting line. What's the difference between a good converter or a properly matched converter and one that's like the situation we have here? It could be a second, it could be 2 seconds on the time slip. So that's why in a situation like the car ran 850 the other night, but you can't even go by that because it just oozed off the starting line with the tight converter. So I knew that the converter that we put in here was wrong as soon as we put it in. I put the car on the ground, I put it in gear, it went clunk right into gear, like, the loose converter shouldn't do that. It should kind of like ease into it. And then you give it gas and it just drives away like a normal torque converter. So I knew we were going to have a problem with it. Doing like playing around out here, launching the car in the parking lot and out on the street out there, you can't tell anything. Because while it doesn't have, this engine doesn't have Wheaties to actually get the car moving like that, it has enough to break traction. So in the parking lot, there's not enough grip, and the car will just, once it breaks the tires, the motor comes up into its power range and it'll mimic a good converter. You don't know what you have until you actually take it to the track. So that's one of the things. If you're going to order a converter for yourself, you want to take the car to the track and get 60-foot numbers on it. That's a major part of the tuning process. You need to know what you're working with before you start ordering parts. Now, you can't just order something out of the catalog. In fact, in this situation, if we had just ordered any generic 3,500 RPM converter out of the catalog, we would have been miles ahead. Now, one of our main trolls, and the guy's actually, he's a good guy. Mopars are everything. He was yelling at me last night about how I need to do a video telling people how to not be an idiot like you and order a converter the right way and this, that, and the other thing, so I'm going to do that. The right way to order a converter, right? He says, you're going for the step above catalog. You want a custom-built converter for your car. And there could be a huge difference between a catalog converter and one that's custom-built for your car. You really want to have dyno sheets. Your time slips are good. You can go with time slips and you can estimate and get an idea where you want to be, but to really have the person designing the converter give you exactly the thing you need, a dyno sheet is the best way. So this way they can actually see where the motor starts to make power, where it peaks, where it starts to fall off, and they can tailor the converter to those purposes. They want to know everything. Ordering a converter is exactly like ordering a camshaft. The person you're dealing with who's going to custom design this cam or custom design this converter has to know the weight of the car, the type of tire you're using, the type of racing that you're going to do, the gear ratio. They need to know every dynamic aspect of the car to custom craft the converter to your specific needs. So like I said, I knew going in this converter was not going to work, but I wanted to see just what was going to happen when we stuck it to the track and went. So a couple of things about that video, going back to the video and responding to some of the comments that were made. There were a few of you guys that were like, "You're sleeping at the light. You don't know. You got beat by a Tercel," whatever it is that they said. I said in the video, I says, "Listen, I'm going to let the other car go first so that when we run this thing, I can get video of it and I can hear and watch the car and not have any distractions." That's why I let the other car go. If you're doing a test and tune, if you're at a test and tune, remember, you're not drag racing at a test and tune. You're there to test and tune, right? If you're lined up against something that makes a lot of noise and makes a lot of racket, just sit there. The light turns green. Just sit there. Let the other car go. Because if this thing is next to you making all kinds of racket, you can't listen to your own car. Even the vibrations, you get something that's really loud, you're going to sense the other car alongside yours. So testing and tuning, it's not a drag race. Don't worry about what's in the other lane. He's just testing and tuning also. Let them go. And then this way you can just focus on what your car does. And then later on, when you're watching on the video, the sound is very important. You want to be able to determine the sounds that your car is making and not mixed in with somebody else's. Now, in the video also, I commented that I was expecting the car to rise, even though it was really soft. At 2-something seconds, 60 foot. It was really soft. I still expected when I gave it gas to feel a little oomph, from the pinions that were hitting the chassis of the car. But instead, it felt like a dive. I didn't know why that was. I couldn't figure it out. And when I came back, I looked. I have air shocks in this car. Not to raise it, but to stiffen or loosen the suspension. I don't know what it's going to want. So we've got air shocks on the car. And the line on this side had pulled out. So I didn't have any air shock there, and that's why the back of the car got a little wonky as it left the starting line. So got that squared away now. This way I can preload or loosen the shocks and then figure out exactly what we want, whatever's going to work best, and we go from there. But all in all, I was very happy with the car. I was happy with it. It handles great. I mean, literally, you could just take your hand off and it just goes straight. There's like no weirdness, no pulling, no, it's like driving a limousine. It's like the most boring car in the world to send down the track. So I'm happy with this thing otherwise. We'll have the converter in it. Like I said, after the bottle rocket race, we'll have the converter in here and we'll take it out again and see what she's going to do. I'm expecting the car to run someplace in like the mid to high sevens. You know, I'm thinking with the converter we should be able to go right into like the 790 to 780 range, and I think with some tuning and some tweaking and so on and so forth, I think I'm seeing like 750, 740 like that. I think that's where the car will end up. 8th mile, obviously, right? And I'm content with that. That's all I wanted to do. It's just supposed to be a fun bracket car, and one of those bitchin' burnouts. So, yeah, I know that people have to. Why are you doing so much of a burnout? You don't have to do that so much of a burnout. Because it's fun. Because it's fun. That's what we do this stuff for. We're doing this to have fun. This is not life and death. You know, there's lots of things to get serious about. There's lots of things to get all like about. Hot rods is not one of them. It's just like the D&D Speed Shop thing. People freaking out about the glitter that Danny put inside of her car. What is wrong with you guys? Focus on, we got some real problems in the world, and things that we're doing with these hot rods and stuff like that. That doesn't count, right? Focus on the real problems in the world, not this stuff. All right, so that's it. The proceeds of this video are going to finance Uncle Crystal's chicken coop. She should have the finest chicken coop in the land, so make sure you watch the whole thing. Well, you've already done that. We're at the end of the video, so you've already seen the whole thing. So good job, good on you. And that's it for now, and I'll see you tomorrow.